Thank you very much. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me to speak. Thank you, Patricia, wherever you are, for doing such a wonderful job of putting all this together. I wish I was the chief scientist of something. That was a long time ago. You know, I ended up not being a scientist anymore. And what do they do with NASA people who are scientists that move on? They move into management. So I'm thrilled to be a manager of scientists, which is a different kind of a job. And one that I'm very excited about, but I really want to tell you about our SwampWorks at NASA Kennedy Space Center. And I thought about, the technologies that we develop and SwampWorks. SwampWorks is sort of our version of the labs of innovation of the past, the Kelly Johnson Skunk Works and the Werner von Braun development shops that happen. So we try to create something at Kennedy Space Center in this operations environment where we're launching huge rockets. We wanted to preserve an innovative spirit and an innovative area where we could do research and development in a rapid, no walls type of environment where things could be iterated quickly. And that's a challenge in a big operating environment like a NASA center. So I want to talk a little bit about what we do, but I can't hit it all because there's about 80 different technologies or even more that are somehow in an ongoing state of development and work at the SwampWorks and in our division. But I also thought about Go for Purpose, the theme for this year, and really wanted to spend some time talking about why we do it, who we are, what our purpose is as a government research team in a large operational environment, and how we seek to partner and work with others to develop technologies for space exploration. So let's see if I can go forward. All right. So the Kennedy Space Center that we all know here is about space launch systems. So there's the past, the beautiful rocket garden at our visitor center, the heritage that we have of rocket development and test, and even the shuttle, our most recent heritage of human space exploration out of Kennedy Center. Everybody knows about this. There's the present. There's SpaceX launching almost regularly now, and United Space Launch Alliance also launching commercially. The spaceport, the multi-user spaceport of Kennedy is really open for business, and we're seeing an uptick in the launch cadence and in the potential and active commercial partners that are coming in to utilize this space. And we also have, continuing over 1 million visitors a year coming to the Kennedy area to see this in action and to look at the heritage that's happened. Then there's also the spaceport of the future at Kennedy Space Center. We're all looking ahead to SLS, the biggest rocket and the development systems that go along with it. And so this is Kennedy Space Center, and all the technology and research and development work that we're doing at SwampWorks and in our division is somehow tied back to this purpose at Kennedy Space Center, the multi-user spaceport, enabling that to go forward. And when you see rockets, and when I pulled these images off of the public affairs sites and things, people like to see fire coming out of things. People like to see big rockets and excitement, and that's probably what you're seeing. But what I'm seeing as a researcher at Kennedy is I'm seeing flame deflection technology, flame trenches, roads. I'm seeing blast berms. I'm seeing spheres of cryogenic propellant being managed, handled, delivered, put into rockets and taken out of rockets before launch. I'm seeing the technology, the umbilicals that do that and safely disjoint from the vehicle. I'm seeing lightning suppression technologies to minimize electrostatic discharge and unsafe conditions. I'm seeing all that infrastructure that goes into getting that rocket to the pad and getting it off safely. That's the kind of thing that at Kennedy Space Center is sort of the unsung, operational side of the research and development world, but it's necessary. And as we go from the spaceport of the future here on Earth to the spaceport of the future in any destination where we may be on Mars, the Moon, we've got to consider and take with us all that infrastructure in some way. And so a lot of the technology that we look ahead to at Kennedy Space Center and SwampWorks is looking ahead to how do we bring that spaceport and that infrastructure along with us in a minimizing way to the Moon or Mars when we have to have spaceports there. So the heart of our SwampWorks is an innovation environment. This is really it's nostalgic to me to go into this building. This is a high bay, about 8,000 square feet, that's been repurposed for research and technology development. There's no walls. There's some open office and meeting areas. No cubicles even in this kind of environment. No offices with closed doors. Everybody's kind of working on the floor together or in the loft together, just working on problems and projects. One of the crowning resources in this heart of the swamp works is a 120-ton regolith bin full of lunar regolith simulant, and it's enclosed because you can see when on the lower right there, when the teams are working with the regolith, it brings up a lot of very fine dust, which has a respiratory hazard. Certainly, that kind of dusty environment is something we're going to have to work with in future spaceports as well. We've done in partnership with, in this case, North Dakota, testing of a new and in development spacesuit technology that they were working on. We also develop robotic systems like this one that's pictured called Razor. It's a small robotic excavator that can dig into the regolith and then be used to move the regolith to systems that could extract water or oxygen for propellants. So this is nostalgic because in this same location, about 40 years ago, the Apollo astronauts were actually training in this facility and nearby to do lunar surface operations. And so it's really neat to kind of see it come full circle after this time where we're kind of coming back to doing lunar surface type operations and analyses and studies and technology development. So that's really what a lot of people talk about when we talk about the swamp works because of that. But there's a lot more going on in our division, a lot more R&T type work. There's not just this regolith mechanics and operations and additive manufacturing that we do. There's spaceflight technologies too throughout the division. Two of them pictured here. One is a CO2 processing benchtop system that's eventually going to go into a Mars ISRU demonstration mission. That'll get shrunk down into extracting CO2 and turning it into oxygen and with water, also methane. And then other spaceflight technologies, the big mess of wires and stuff is a prototype, a bench prototype, and a test bed system for the mass spectrometer and gas chromatograph that will be on the Resource Prospector mission, which is expected to go to the moon in the near future to have a rover and a lander to look for and ground truth the water ice that is expected to be in the permanently shadowed craters on the lunar South Pole. And so all of that mess of wires has been a great way to rapidly innovate and test various design phases, but it's all got to get shrunk down into the size of a shoebox in the next year, and they're working on that. Ground systems for cryogenic storage and handling and insulation and management. That's another big area of R&D and technology development at Kennedy. On the left is pictured a 33,000-gallon liquid hydrogen tank that just went through a completion of testing of densified propellant loading, densified hydrogen propellant work, which is very, very cold down at the 20 Kelvin range, and then how to manage that and store it without any loss of hydrogen. Right now, the large hydrogen tanks will boil off hydrogen with a little bit of power. This type of technology demonstrates that even on larger scales, you can really start to use zero boil-off technology to refrigerate and maintain and have no loss of hydrogen. This actually is the proof, technology proof that's allowed NASA to offer in the 1.4 million gallon hydrogen tank that they'll be building for SLS in the next year or so. They've offered this zero boil off and advanced insulation technology. So over the course of the life of that sphere, we'll save tens of millions of dollars in lost hydrogen, even using the electricity that we use to cool it down and keep it cool. There's also a universal propellant managing system. This is smaller. It's for doing autonomous loading and unloading in a safe fashion for smaller rockets, small class vehicles. Actually, this one has just been loaned out to a commercial partner. They took it halfway across the nation. You can see it's kind of in a container-sized area. You can box it up, move it out. They're doing engine testing in their location. We'll bring it back. We'll be able to use it for other customers or keep developing it ourselves. Then there's a lot more basic type of technologies and things going on in our division. I think about our environment. We're the lightning capital of the world in Florida, and so a lot of electrostatic issues and concerns associated with that and how it affects electronics. But one of the interesting spin-offs from that expertise in our group is the nondescript-looking aluminum box, which is the electronics for an electrodynamic dust shield, which will be able to fly on Space Station next year for a technology demonstration mission. It was just awarded that opportunity recently. It's the kind of thing that in a dusty environment like the moon or Mars, you could use an electrodynamic dust shield to remove dust electronically from camera lenses or solar panels or things like that. And so this is a technology that could be very valuable in the spaceport beyond Earth. And then also rust and corrosion. That's a big deal at Kennedy. We've got plenty of salt air and humidity to corrode our systems. We're always looking ahead to what's coming down the pike. What are the next technologies for corrosion prevention and control? What are, in this case, some regulatory preventative mechanisms that are eventually going to be regulated out of existence? We need to be smart buyers as researchers, smart buyers as NASA, to make sure that we're not putting ourselves in a corner that's going to end up imposing itself on one of our larger missions. Finally, I'll highlight on the lower right something that's more at the early innovation phase. We're calling it solar white. The physicists that worked on it and started developing this did so because they wanted to find a way to really reflect as much of the solar energy spectrum as they could in space in order to try to get down to really good cold temperatures to have cryogenics fuels stored for long terms in space without a lot of power required. So they worked the physics out, and theoretically, and this is a little benchtop test, it has the ability to be 10 times more effective at reflecting solar spectral energy than, say, a silver-backed mirror, which is probably close to state of the art today. So it could achieve that, but it's early in the phases of development. The Space Technology Mission Directorate is funding this and supporting it. It's getting a lot of excitement. But one thing we talk about is, okay, this could be really game-changing. This could really make a difference. In space, cryogenic storage with no power required could get us really fast to Mars. It could really make a difference to a lot of the architectures that we're talking about. But this is a benchtop test. So one of my early mentors told me, and I always tell the folks in my division, don't let your marketing get ahead of your technology. If you're trying to be a technologist and you're trying to advance your state of the art, you have a vision. You know where you want to go. You know what this could be for. But at these early stages, it's really critical not to oversell it to a stakeholder or an investor because, well, they might just want to have it done next year and you're not going to be there. And then where are you? Another interesting spin-off from this one, or a different direction, is that while they did it for cryogenics and surface-type operations, that's why they came up with this, the Science Mission Directorate has looked at this and said, well, if we put this on the bottom of a robotic mission to the sun, could we get closer to the sun than ever before before burning up and still operate? And so SMD is really excited about this technology and the possibility of robotic missions closer to the sun and doing heliophysics in ways that nobody ever thought. So I wanted to use that to illustrate that you start out on a technology path in one area, and sometimes it ends up being something else that's more important, and the application goes in another direction. You got to be able to tack with the winds, as Bill Gerstenmaier said yesterday. So that's really the what we do, and if any of this piqued your interest or you want to know more, I'm happy to talk later, and we'll talk about more of the kinds of ground and launch kinds of technologies that we're working on at SwampWorks and at KSC. But how do we do it? And who are we? What is our purpose as a research lab? So I think that we need to look at the unique workforce, the unique workplace that we're in, and the unique products that we develop. And as a research team, that creates a unique niche for us. And we're a government research team, so our goal is to develop technologies that enable exploration for NASA missions, for commercial missions, for any spaceport and spaceport development type mission that there might be. That's how we bring it all together and have a unique presence. Okay, and then another piece of the big culture at Kennedy Space Center is that failure is not an option. And this was made famous by Gene Kranz and Apollo 13, which is probably, in my mind, has got to be one of the most crowning and important achievements of human spaceflight in our history, to be able to adapt, respond, innovate, and bring home our crew safely. Hundreds of people worked on this together, and innovation was really on high demand and high alert that day. But that culture permeates through NASA in every way today, and failure is not an option is absolutely necessary at our spaceport, where we're launching $100 million rockets and multi-$100 million payloads. But in a research environment, I want to go a different direction. I need to try to communicate that failure is not an option, ends up putting a researcher in a position where they're really not able to iterate rapidly and work in a different environment. So I'll change it to, I'd like to change it to failure is pretty good as an option. I don't know if that'd be a bestseller or not if I wrote the book, but yes, I mean, in a research world, that's the way we are trying to think, and we're talking to our programs about that. But really, it's only pretty good as an option if some very important tenets are maintained. You fail safe, absolutely. That doesn't mean just bodily, human harm. That means your facility can't be destroyed in the process of failing, or else you can't do the next one, which is adjust quickly, reiterate, keep going. And then also, if you learn from your failures, I mean, if you didn't learn from a failure, what good was that failure? You didn't learn anything. And then finally, and I think very importantly, you share your failure. I tell our folks in the research group, if you didn't publish it, if you didn't put it out in a place where others who are trying to work in this area would be able to find it, it's as if you never did it. I wasted my money, you wasted your time, NASA wasted its time. If you don't share it, it's as if you never did it. And I think that's really important because researchers don't want to share their failures, but sometimes that's the most important thing to share. I think for researchers, we try to talk about better is the enemy of good enough. The Italian proverb from way back. If you're a researcher, you want to make it good enough, then go to test, iterate. If it fails, fail safe, reiterate, and keep working on it until you get to the point where you've got something better. And keep doing that. Small steps will get you to the goal. That's kind of the juxtaposition of the NASA Kennedy Space Center failure is not an option culture and this little research group that's trying to work in an environment where failure is pretty good as an option. How do they communicate with each other? That can lead to some pretty exciting conversations. So some things that I do with the group and as we try to enable it is keep it simple. But if you make it too simple, this gets crazy. We have let's have a researcher here, and we've got these big programs at KSC, the SLS and ground systems. We've got the ISS, and you say, go ahead, go talk to those people, find out what their problems are, solve them, be a researcher, develop technology, infuse it into the mission. But pretty soon, Mike here is saying, who do I talk to? I'm making calls, and I'm not getting any calls back. Where do I start? What do they need? He's having these questions, and when the programs do call back, they say things like procedures, process, requirements, oversight, reporting. And a lot of times the researcher in this kind of environment says, I can't do this, I don't know what to do, I give up. And that's definitely not a place that you want to be. That's a place that I've seen a number of researchers at NASA and other researchers, academic researchers too, you could think of, trying to work your way into these NASA programs and understand what they need. And then getting hit with this set of requirements, it does get difficult to understand. There's miscommunication between the two sides. So I don't want to keep it that simple. Instead, let's start over and have SwampWorks. SwampWorks is the inspiration of it, the spirit of it is to create sort of a bubble of safety around the PIs and with the PIs so they can iterate, be able to do things, take a little more risk in a research environment, and communicate simply with the leadership of a research team. And then that research team with people like me and others that are on my group that have more operations experience, we talk to the big programs. And the programs know if they're talking to SwampWorks leadership, those folks know how to talk to us, and the researchers will get the job done, and we'll get the products we need, and we'll get it in a timely fashion. You're making it simpler for the researcher, and that is really what I'm trying to do, is get that researcher to do good work that leads into a technology innovation for one of these programs. We're not the only one. SwampWorks, there's lots of programs, lots of entities like this, a few other ones like the RISE program at ISS or the Center for the Advancement of Science and Space CASES. They provide this friendly front door for academics, NASA people, and commercial researchers to come through, and it simplifies the process. You might call it a middleman. Am I a middleman in a way? Yes, I want to be a friendly front door between research and operations, but I think that's necessary in our world to let the big programs keep moving at their pace while technologists can iterate and work on problems and get solutions that they can actually use. So Leverage, leverage, leverage. I think these days there's no such thing as the ivory tower where the researcher goes and does something and then comes out with a technology and it's wonderful and useful. That's well gone. The internet and computers have made it so that we really need to work together. We work with academic entities and researchers, commercial partners, other government agencies throughout every single technology that we work on. We're a partner. You could think of us as a partner who, if you're trying to get into support one of these larger programs, we could be a potential partner for that avenue for you. If you're working on technologies that are in this zone, what we're here to do is, as a government research lab, we're here to enable the success of your mission, commercial missions as well as NASA missions. So partnering is really a key to what we do. And then I'm kind of ending up here with the technology valley of death. A lot of people talk about this. If you're a technology person, you've heard about it. Oh my God, the valley of death. When you have this innovation and you've got a vision for utilization, there's this terrible death valley in there that you've got to cross to get your technology from the bench all the way into utilization. And the valley's populated with trolls and technology gremlins and technology demons who just can't wait to get their hands on your stuff and throw it out or mess it up. And if you think that you've got one innovation and you're going to get through the valley and you're going to come out on the other end to utilization that you envision, it probably is a valley of death. You're not going to get there. It's probably not going to look like that. And so many of us talk about this valley of death in technology. I want to shut up that conversation and think of it in a different way, because I know there's a different way. So I was thinking, all right, if I reflect the valley upward, I've got this thing that looks kind of like maybe a mountain in the distance with clouds and shrouding and causing mystery, and we don't know. And then I could get rid of, forget going through the valley. Let's think about going over the mountain. Well, what is this mountain going to be called? I'm not going to call it the mountain of death, but because, well, that doesn't sound so inviting. How about the mountain of opportunity? So this is the mountain of opportunity, and I really think this fits the description of what a technologist needs to do to get something to utilization much better than the valley of death does. As you're going along, you come up the mountain, you make iterative steps. The clouds clear at some point. You didn't know where you were going to go. There might be multiple ways to go. Maybe you're getting over the mountain. There's zigs, there's zags along the way. The technology takes a different turn. Maybe another cloud clears, and there's even more opportunities, more directions to go. And at the end, I'm doing it down here, but I don't see it up there. But at the end, you get through to multiple intended applications, multiple intended opportunities. And so thank you very much. That's what we do. We're developing technologies to enable exploration, and I hope I have some time for questions.
All right, thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you to the audience members for sending in some very good questions. Keep them coming. Question from the audience here. How you talk about working with universities, other companies, et cetera. How can an organization gain access to SwampWorks and to start working with you?
Certainly, SwampWorks is available online. We have a partnerships office at Kennedy Space Center. So I think if you Googled SwampWorks, you'll find the links. Certainly, you can connect with me and talk about it. If you look for SwampWorks on the NASA Tech Port, you'll also find technologies there that SwampWorks is developing and working on. If you find something of interest, there are points of contact there. So the website is where a lot of people find us. Conferences, people find us there, and we try. We're a government lab, so we feel obligated to try to answer everybody's interest and do the very best we can to address all questions.
Wonderful. So internally within NASA, you talked about some of the partnerships and the support that you give to programs. How would you characterize, though, in general, how SwampWorks works? Is it just as much, let's say, technology push as it is pull? How do you balance your contributions?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think that I'd say our organization is half and half. Half of it is funded through technology push style programs and projects. NASA wants to, they've identified technologies in the Space Technology Mission Directorate that need to be pushed. We're working on those with the vision of how then does that eventually become a pull from one of the large NASA programs. They don't want to invest in something until they see return on investment. It needs to get pretty far down the line, get over that mountain of opportunity and be on the downslope before a big program is going to take it on. So I think we're about half and half in that environment.
So this is a transition question from that. So I happen to be in the middle of reading Skunk Works by Ben Rich. I don't know if you've read that book, but it's fantastic, talking about the development of Skunk Works and all the various projects from the 60s through the 90s and plus. How, granted that is more within a private organization, but what lessons have you taken from Skunk Works and other companies, small research organizations, and how have you implemented that into SwampWorks?
I think personally what I've taken away is that there has to be an interface between the innovative environment and the outside world. And that, in our case, that's the technology leadership at Kennedy Space Center in our organization. And other entities work in different ways. But it doesn't work to just set your researchers and technologists, even if they're brilliant people, completely free, and don't find ways to bring out what they're doing into an operating environment and communicate to the operators who don't see what's behind the curtain. Hey, these people are doing great things. Let me help you see why it's going to benefit you. So that intermediary is critical.
Excellent. Given that, how do you think that your organization has changed the direction or influence how KSC does innovation?
I think that it's an ongoing thing. Kennedy Space Center has had sort of ebbs and flows of embracing research and technology as part of its core versus, very recently it's not been so much of an important thing. I think it's coming back, and so I think SwampWorks and our research and technology group is bringing back the idea that a multi-user spaceport is launching rockets, and there are lots of customers, and they have needs, they have problems. NASA has needs and problems. A research team that's available to help figure out how to solve those problems is very valuable.
So, can I extrapolate from that the flow from the previous ebb is a direct function of the increased use and activity down at the Florida Space Coast?
Oh, a good question. I think I'm only been at SwampWorks for about 2 years. So coming from a research center after 20 years there and then being at SwampWorks, I don't have as much of an appreciation of the last ebb and flow, but I do see an upswing. I do see the kind of connection between what our researchers are doing and what the programs are looking for getting stronger, and the programs are starting to pull more. Maybe that's a function of the Space Launch System getting closer to implementation, and EM1 is now just over the horizon, and they can see the end of the tunnel. That may be more of a driver than anything else.
Okay. I've got a question for you here. So your slides on failure is not an option. So that, as noted, that tendency leads to very expensive and, in fact, then fewer human space flights, and just keeping these rockets on the ground. So instead, this is a question from the audience, instead, shouldn't the risks be minimized but the potential for failure better communicated? And commercial companies seem to be addressing that and working that direction. How do you think NASA has or has not taken that approach?
NASA does, there's one right thing NASA can do in this area, and for researchers, we tell them all, you've got to do this. Plan for failure. It's really that simple. Just plan for it and put it into your process. If you need to do procedures and requirements and oversight and everything, okay, reporting, fine. Plan failure into your schedule. Plan failure into your test regimen. And then you are a bona fide, NASA project following the 7120 NPR, blah, blah. But you just planned it in. And yes, you're going to plan that in, and you're going to show a schedule that's longer probably than what could be cut. But there's always slack in everybody's schedule. So you just got to fight to plan for failure.
Do you think that, based on your many decades at NASA, culture plays a huge part in that? Mm-hmm. Do you think that the culture supports that planning recommendation that you've just proposed? It's been a couple of years since Columbia and Challenger. There's always the peak that says the pendulum swings one way and says, yes, we have to embrace this. But where are we now?
Right.
So many years later?
I need a caveat, that last comment about plan for failure but planning for failure is still not an option for human space flight and for very, very big robotic exploration missions. Within NASA, we're not going to plan for those failures at that level, but planning for failure at the subsystem level and the component level and the integrated level before you get to the big mission, that's where I mean planning for failure works with NASA, can work with NASA. Not everybody tries to do that, but I think it's an oversight, and NASA could really benefit from doing that.
Wonderful. Jeffrey, thank you so much for your insights this morning.